So that's kind of a question that has sort of come up, is who is Laurie Vallow? Like, psychologically, who's the person that we're dealing with? And so a question I've kind of got for you guys is, do you think you figured out her psychology? Do you agree with this? I think it's a body language expert. So it's a body language expert prognosticating on her psychology. He's not a psychology expert as far as I know. Aitken, good to see you here. Aitken, were you able to hear the audio of that clip I played right in the beginning? And so the question is, do you agree with his assessment that she's a psychopath and a narcissist? Because it's something we tend to hear in almost every true crime case. It's a psychopathic narcissist, I guess. Do you agree that that is a correct assessment? And we're going to look at Laurie Vallow speaking, not just her standing and you couldn't hear it. Let me stop the screen again. I'm not sure why it does this. We stop the screen and then try doing it again. Hopefully it'll work this time. So let me know if you can hear the screen now. Go over here.
Top line on that reaction.
What we're looking at in a nutshell, in my opinion, and I think it's not just my opinion, but
no, I can't hear it either. I'm not quite sure what to do here.
brain that lets you feel emotions for other people so you can be empathetic. She doesn't have that. None of it, not even a little bit. It's highly narcissistic, obviously. It's class A clinical narcissism, but it goes above that and it goes into psychopathy when you have zero empathy, none whatsoever, other than for yourself. That's
well, listen, I was in my head today juxtaposing.
Okay, so I think we've solved the problem for now. So I'm going to play it one more time and hopefully we can get the full thing. But the issue is, do we know basically the psychology of the person that we're dealing with? In other words, we've been dealing with the Laurie Vallow case for how long? Is it basically 3.5 years if you take around about 3 years? Have we figured out who this person is that we've spent so much time thinking about, writing about, talking about? Have we figured out who she is? Right? So let's listen to this again and let's listen to what he says. And tell me if you agree with his assessment.
Of making sense of behavior like this. He analyzes it for a living, in fact. Scott, so just give me your, top line on that reaction.
What we're looking at in a nutshell, in my opinion, and I think it's not just my opinion, but a lot of other folks that I've talked with as well in the same business I'm in, I think she's a straight up psychopath. We're seeing no emotions at all, nothing whatsoever. And the reason being is her brain, I would venture to say, and I will bet anyone as much as you want to bet, there's something wrong with her neurologically. And the thing that would be.
Okay, so he calls her a straight up psychopath and that she doesn't show any emotion. So let me ask you a question kind of straight off the bat. If you don't show emotion, does that mean you're a psychopath? Let's just sort of take that thing. If you don't show emotion, does that mean you're a psychopath? What do you guys say? Lollies all the way. Good to have you here. Eiston, what do you think? If you don't show emotion, does that mean you're a psychopath? Is that the test that you're a psychopath if you don't show emotion? So I can tell you that I've sat in on a couple of murder trials, and you are told in court, not only the gallery, but everybody, to not react, to not cry or laugh or to make any comments. No one is supposed to react in a trial setting. So what was Laurie supposed to do? Break down? Was she supposed to? What was she supposed to do? And then if you look at other people in her position, the fact that they also don't show any emotion, is that a sign that they're psychopaths? And yes, Alina says, didn't she have emotion before? And bear in mind everything that preceded this. Laurie got married. Laurie fell in love. Laurie got caught up in the sort of idea of herself. Laurie became kind of obsessed with Chad and the way Chad saw her. Is that someone who's got no feelings, right? If you, how can I put it? If you fall in love, go on honeymoon, and go off after your fairy tale, is that psychopathic? You might say yes in terms of her children, but then why did none of her first 4 husbands see her as psychopathic? Why did her children not see her as psychopathic? Why did Chad not see her as psychopathic? Why did Alex, who was doing her bidding, seeing her as psychopathic? So in the court setting, I really don't know if you can say that. And the other people who say when everything is over, you see Laurie standing with her arms crossed like this. Well, isn't she doing that because she's feeling upset with her lawyers and upset with the situation? So can you say when someone's convicted, oh, I think that's a psychopathic narcissist? Is that fair? Yeah, so there you have it. Other people said that she was a good mother. I mean, why did Kay and Larry give a child to Laurie if she was never showing any emotion, if she seemed to be a psychopath? So I don't think you can come in at the end when someone's convicted and sort of cheerlead, you know what, she's a psychopath, she was evil all along. Well, who was she before that? And so, you can come in at the end and say, you know what, she shows no emotion and she's a cold, hard killer. Well, if that were true, then why didn't she commit these crimes herself? I don't know. So I just think it's a simplistic way of looking at this. And I think what we need to do is have this discussion. And, I was supposed to be in Boise tomorrow. And so I had a flight booked to Boise, and then I was going to stay in an Airbnb for the whole week next week, because I was told that the trial would be 8 weeks, and the trial was barely 7 weeks. And I thought the 8th week would be Laurie Vallow testifying. And if you think about where we are right now, Laurie lost her case, and so what did she have to lose if that's where the tea leaves were? Maybe her defense attorneys didn't know that would be the case. Maybe they're playing kind of a, well, we still want to appeal game, right? But if you think about it, if the situation was as it stood, Laurie stood nothing to lose, given what the jury were thinking and what the jury have decided, if she testified in her own defense, saying whatever she was going to say. Maybe the jury seeing Laurie, because I think it's very weak. You're accused of all of these crimes and you decide not to speak up for yourself. I can understand the legal side to it, but the other side is also make, in terms of a defense, make some kind of effort to defend yourself. Anyway, that's something completely different. I want to show you this picture. Can you guys see that? Is that someone who's showing no emotion? She's got her arms folded. She's looking down. She doesn't look like she's not showing any emotion, if you ask me, right? She has actually shown quite a lot of emotion during the trial. She's smiled at her attorneys at certain times. And this is where I think you've got to ask yourself, do you care about authentic true crime analysis, or do you just say what is at the top of your head? You just say, you know what, I think that makes sense. But then you don't really think about it. What I mean is, in trial, in court, during the trial, when photos of JJ were shown, Laurie didn't look at them. When Tylee's remains were sort of on display, the gallery were looking at them, right? There were times when you couldn't see them, and then there were times when certain things you could see, bone fragments and some of the excavations. Laurie didn't look at that. Now, did she not look at that because she doesn't have any emotion, or did she not look at that because she wanted to prevent herself from feeling an emotion? Surely, if you're a psychopath, you could look at those photos and not feel emotion. Is that what we're dealing with? Somebody who gets married 5 times, do you think that's someone who has no emotions? Someone who wants to marry someone else but feels that her children are in the way and her children are obstacles, and her children are irritating, and not, it's not romantic. Do you think that's someone who's not emotional? Do you think Chad is writing a romantic story with Laurie as a heroine? Do you think that's not an emotional story? That's not a story intended to trigger emotions, right? So I don't know, like, so yeah, you have like, and I really respect Ashley Banfield. I think she's really smart and she's got great analysis. And yeah, she's got an expert on who's basically making an assessment of Laurie Vallow, and I sort of just feel, is it right? Does it make sense? Is it true? Is it? That's also a good point. And I, at the same time that I don't think she's a psychopath, I also think there are elements of psychopathy in terms of this crime. Like, I don't think you could commit some of the acts in this crime, like burning someone's body, killing your own child, having your brother do X, Y, and Z. I don't think you could do that if there wasn't an element of psychopathy present, if there wasn't the ability to remove yourself from what is really going on. And this is where it brings up a very horrible sort of topic, which is, if you have a certain belief, doesn't that tend to make a psychopath out of you? In other words, if you believe certain people are good people, are chosen people, are acceptable people, but all other people are zombies or evil, whatever, that is psychopathy. In other words, even in the war in Ukraine, I think the Ukrainians think of and refer to the Russians as orcs. And so they dehumanize them so that it's easier for them to commit, to do war, or to commit wartime behavior every single day. If you think of the other side as a human being just like you, it's much harder to do that, right? And the same with the Russians. I think the Russians see the Ukrainians as a certain kind of subhuman or whatever, and so it's easier for them to do the same thing. And so I've often said this: someone who's on their phone constantly, if you're traveling with someone, they're on their phone constantly, or you doing whatever, that person is almost the same as a psychopath as well. They don't have any knowledge or empathy. They don't care what's going on with you. They are just in their own little world. And so, isn't that all of us at a certain stage? When you're with someone, but you're completely focused on your phone and what's that is also psychopathic, and that's also narcissism. Are you a psychopathic narcissist because you killed 4 people and you didn't show emotion, or can you be a psychopathic narcissist because you're on your phone a lot? So labels like that, I don't feel are very helpful, and I don't think it's accurate either. Yeah, Elizabeth, you're right. So I think it's one thing to say, I don't think it's that. And then I think one's got to say, well, what is it? If it's not that, what are we talking about? I just want to repeat what I said earlier. It is absolutely normal for criminals that are on trial, when the verdict is read, to not show any emotion. It's completely normal. I've sat in on a triple X murderer who visibly showed no emotion. There's a little bit of, you could see that he's in court. You could actually see that he was breathing or slightly elevated, but outwardly he showed very, very little sign of emotion. Letitia Stork, did she show any emotion? And does that mean she's a psychopath? So it's a very narrow way of deciding who someone is. I mean, is Chris Watts a psychopath, or is he an introvert? Do introverts show a lot of emotion? If not, does it mean an introvert is a psychopath? Some people in a public setting try not to show emotion because they have like a shield, and Laurie, with the arms folded like that, is trying to protect herself. And we're going to watch some video now where you actually see her go into that guarded body language as well. So maybe we should go to that. I'm going to play this again, but before I do, I want to just go to the actual reading of the verdict.
The defendant would please rise.
In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Fremont, State of Idaho plaintiff versus Lori Noreen Vallow, aka Lori Noreen Daybell, defendant, case number CR 22211624. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1.
Okay, so just before we deal with Laurie's reaction, I want to ask you just to pay attention also to Archibald. Does he show emotion? If he doesn't, is he a psychopath? Thomas, does he show emotion? The orderlies behind them, all the other people in court, are they supposed to show emotion as well? If so, what are they supposed to cheer in a courtroom? What are they supposed to do? Helena says she's much smaller than I imagined. Yet she is actually quite small. She's actually surprisingly diminutive. So let's go back to that.
In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty.
Hi everyone, Mark here. It's Andy.
Sorry about that. We just got an ad here. Let's go back to that. Yeah, so as Mel Stiller says, the judge gives instructions. You may not react to the verdict. So how can you be told not to react. When you don't react, because you don't react, you're now a psychopath. So that's quite a good point. Sorry, the internet connection here is definitely a little slow. Anyway, yeah. Bling is the new black. Can you hear me? No, I'm not coming to Texas. I was going to go to Texas to cover the Armstrong case, and that case has now been postponed beyond. It was supposed to be late June, and so because it's been postponed, also the Koberger trial has been postponed, the preliminary hearing. I was going to try to stay in America until July, and now I'm going to leave about a month early. So that's the response to that. So, this kind of comes up every time someone commits a crime, is that people, you sort of dismiss it as the person's insane or mad or unstable, or there's mental illness or some other label. And it seems to be because we can't stand the idea that someone makes a rational decision to kill someone. In other words, they premeditate it, they plan it. And if you followed this case, you saw how things were covered up, how there were attempts to lie about things that were done. And so that is that exact thinking where you say, I don't think there's any way a normal person could commit this crime. So the only way a crime like this could be committed is if they're insane. That's exactly the kind of thinking that wins a defense case, is you say, well, not guilty by reason of insanity. And again, I think it's a failure to understand the criminal mind, that someone decides my fairy tale is extremely important, I'm extremely important, all other things secondary. And, it doesn't, like, you may not be a criminal and you may not tell lies every day. And so you may not be able to understand the leap from being a certain kind of person to killing one person, killing another person, also killing your own family. But your entire life is not a lie. You're not lying about literally everything in your life. And so that's just another lie you tell yourself in order to do just another extreme step in a series of extreme steps. Anyway, let's see if this is going to work now. Hopefully it will. Let me know if the audio doesn't work. Okay, there we go.
Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6, in regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May.
So do you notice the difference between the people inside the court and the people outside court? No one inside the court are showing any emotion because they're not allowed to, they're not supposed to. And because the media are looking for some kind of emotional sort of payoff, some kind of emotional money shot, they're not going outside the courtroom to get the reaction they want. I personally don't think the appropriate reaction is to smile and high five. You know, it's almost like, yes, we want justice. We glad we got justice, but it doesn't really change anything. People have still died. You're still getting at least an appropriate result within a very horrible setting. I don't think it's really anything to cheer about. I do understand the sentiment that you've been fighting very hard and you've been wanting an outcome, and at least you're getting what you feel is the right outcome. But you know, it's do you follow what I'm saying? It's something that you decide unemotionally that someone is guilty or not. You know what I mean? By the same token, can you imagine if she was found innocent and her family members were cheering? What would that be like? And if you've ever sat in a court when somebody says something and somebody cheers, you can tell how inappropriate that is, because it's always going to favor one side. And then that can lead to an influence. Yeah, so there you go. Okay, so let's continue with this.
2023, signed by the presiding officer.
All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, thank you for reading the verdict into the record. At this time, let me just inquire of the jury, is this in fact your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Let me ask now from counsel, does the state wish to have the jury polled?
We do not, Your Honor.
Does the defense wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, the jury will be polled at this time. Madam Clerk, if you would please indicate only by juror numbers of each of the jurors.
Okay, so I'm not gonna, I just want to take it to where she stands up. Where is that? It's over here. So there you can see she's got her arms folded. So there, do you think that she's not showing any emotion? Can you see her there? She's still not showing any emotion. And so is your assessment that at a particular point in time she doesn't show emotion, and that and then that makes her a psychopath because at that particular point in time she didn't? Does she look like she's not emotional there? All I'm saying is you've got experts going on to mainstream media making sort of claims about Laurie's psychology, which aren't easy to make. That, you know, she's quite a difficult cat, right, to analyze, and then making very confident claims that she's a psychopathic narcissist because she's not showing emotions, and then you see actually she is showing emotions. This is someone who's looking actually quite vulnerable. She doesn't often fold her arms in court. So let's play that clip that I played earlier one more time, and just see how well it sits with you when you hear this.
Stone cold Lori, not a glimmer of emotion. I want to bring in Scott Rouse. He's in the business of making sense of behavior like this. He analyzes it for a living, in fact. Scott, so just give me your, top line on that reaction.
What we're looking at in a nutshell, in my opinion, and I think it's not just my opinion, but a lot of other folks that I've talked with as well in the same business I'm in, I think she's a straight up psychopath. We're seeing no emotions at all, nothing whatsoever. And the reason being is her brain, I would venture to say, and I will bet anyone as much as you want to bet, there's something wrong with her neurologically. And the thing that would be wrong with it would be her amygdala aren't functioning properly. That's the part of the brain that's a part of the limbic system. And that's the part of the brain that lets you feel emotions for other people so you can be empathetic. She doesn't have that. None of it, not even a little bit. It's highly narcissistic, obviously. It's
Well, listen, I was in my head today
Okay, so so this assessment is that she's a narcissistic psychopath, right? And I think, Barbara, you might be a good person to ask. Barbara, does it make you feel good to hear that? She's just been found guilty. She's just been convicted. And then you have like a nice little label for Laurie and then a bow tied around it. And so the question is, does it feel good? Does it sort of, do you sort of almost get a kick out of hearing that's who she is? Right? In other words, do you feel good? And there's no other way to ask the question. Do you feel good hearing that this person that perhaps you don't like and that we know has done something wrong has got this awful sounding label around her? And so now we know exactly who she is and now we know exactly what she did. Does it kind of make you feel reassured and you know, is it what you want to hear? So some of you say that she's holding her arms because she's praying. In the LDS faith, do you fold your arms and pray with your eyes open? I'm just curious. I didn't really know that. So Sandy says, you know, I trust the behavior panel, which I've watched for years. Basically, I trust them. I don't trust you. Why is Laurie as a psychopath being mentioned for the first time? First, certainly to my knowledge, the first time I've heard it mentioned, 13th of May, 2023. Why didn't any of her husbands call her a psychopath? Surely if you're married to someone who's really doesn't have any capacity for feeling, well, why would you not mention that? Why would her own children not mention that? Again, why on earth would Kay and Larry give JJ to Laurie to look after if she was such a psychopath, if she was so selfish? And also, why would Laurie undertake to look after a little boy who's not her child? Why would she undertake to adopt a child if she's a narcissistic psychopath? Let me just say that again. If you're such a narcissist that you're so selfish, you can only think of yourself, why on earth would you adopt someone else's child to look after? And there's another way I can ask the question, which is, are you open to adopting someone else's child? If somebody else asked you, would you mind adopting my child? Would you do it? Because I can tell you there'd be a lot of people who aren't psychopaths or narcissistic who would simply say, I don't really want to adopt. I want my own children. I don't really want to adopt. So I think you could actually argue that someone who does that, almost like someone who adopts an animal that belongs to someone else or adopts a shelter animal, is in fact very unselfish. And so isn't the question that Laurie was a certain kind of person, and isn't there some switch that was flicked that actually made her appear or behave in a way that was extremely strange, not like her? And are we having that conversation? Can we talk about doing certain things, believing certain things, and that actually makes you into basically a monster, just by virtue of the things that you believe, the way that you see other people. You know, one really good example of psychopathy is if you only want to, if you see money as more important than people, that is a kind of psychopathy, that things are more important than people. But that is something that is also part of our society today. We see things as disposable. We sometimes see people as disposable. We become a more psychopathic society. We become a more narcissistic society. And so I think it's a little bit rich to say, as a psychopathic narcissistic society, that criminal is a stone cold narcissist or psychopath. Really? Well, how is that person then different to us? Because the world's full of people who are like that. Thanks a lot, Deborah. Do you understand the point that I'm trying to make? Okay, so we're going to go from that to, I think the best way to understand Laurie isn't from this expert or from me saying to you guys something. It is having Laurie speak for herself, right? And then get a sense of that as well. I also want you to note in this clip that I'm going to play, this was recorded the day Charles Vallow was murdered, right? And Laurie is going to be on trial for that after this. So Laurie's legal story is not over. Personally, I think one of the things that's going through a person's head when they're found guilty, let me just react to this. Barbara, I think you're assuming that trying to get a correct psychology for Laurie, I think you're assuming that if you don't call her the worst possible thing, it means you're defending her, or it means you think that she's innocent. That's not what we're saying. She is guilty, but what is her actual psychology? And I think it's very common in true crime to give someone a label because that means that person's nothing like you. And also that what happened to them couldn't possibly happen to you, right? That Laurie is the only person in the world that's ever had this idea that the world's going to end and then behaved in a certain way. And I mean, one of my patrons told me that her husband, his mother became a Scientologist and abandoned their family, right? Does that mean that person is a psychopath, or does it mean that she got, or that this mother got caught up in beliefs that basically created psychopathic behavior? So then what is psychopathic here? The person, the beliefs, or the person believing the beliefs? What is the actual psychopathic thing? And Barbara, you're 100% right to say, the argument that Archibald made was Laurie didn't actually kill anyone. Laurie was actually in Hawaii when Tammy died. So how is she supposed to have committed that crime? But the counter argument is exactly what you say. Why did she not report them missing? Why did she not try and aid in the search for her children? But that is, to me, not a sign of psychopathy. That is a sign of motive. In other words, I'm not reporting them missing because as soon as I do, I will lose the Social Security benefits. That's got nothing to do with psychopathy. That's got to do with greed. That's got to do with the gearing of this crime. So, I think there are some people who want to do what Barbara's doing, which is basically, I don't want to understand this case. Let's just say the word guilty 1,000 times over and over again, feel good about it, and I don't want to hear anything else. And, you know, if that's you, there are plenty of channels you can go to and have that sort of party. But here we want to try and understand what's really going on, right? And if maybe you don't get that kick where you feel that you can sort of rub your hands together and say, I'm so glad they got Laurie. Well, we want justice, but we also don't want to turn into sadistic monsters while we're at it. We take sadistic pleasure in a criminal getting the justice they deserve. We should be satisfied with that, but we shouldn't be entertained by it. We shouldn't get a kick out of it. And even more than that, we should learn from this case how a certain criminal operates, how certain criminal behavior works, and also, can someone be put on trial for murder and become convicted for murder when they didn't actually commit any of the murders? And the answer is yes. In other words, can you, as the mastermind, and that's a question I asked a long time ago, as I said, who do you think was really pulling the strings here, Chad or Laurie? And I always thought it was Laurie. And then if it is Laurie, she's the arch villain in the story, because she's actually telling Alex and Chad what to do. So she's the most evil of the three, right? But if she doesn't actually commit the crime, but get somebody else to commit it, is she still guilty of anything? And the answer is absolutely she is. But it requires some subtlety from the prosecutor to put their case together, and I think they put a really good case together. Brandon says maybe she's normal and she isn't insane. Sometimes things build up. Mel says, I'm not a registered clinical psychologist. Anyway, the way we try and do things on this channel is we try not to label people. We try and understand them in a human way, not in a label way. Because as soon as you put a label on someone, you're actually stopping this attempt to understand them. And so instead of just saying, oh, I love the behavior panel and that guy's such an awesome guy, let's all cheerlead that label, narcissistic psychopath. Let's use that label in our YouTube video. And that's great. And it's such a simple solution. Instead of doing that, let's actually listen to Laurie and get a sense of who she is in her own words without applying the label. That's harder to do. But that is what we try to do on this channel. So let's get to that.
And do you remember if you ever heard your brother?
I didn't see him ever leave the room,
Okay.
so it was so fast. All that was so fast. Like him on the ground, rolling around, and I'm screaming. And
this probably happened in a couple seconds.
yeah, I mean, it was like super fast.
And I don't know if you know this or not. Does your brother normally carry a gun? Like I carry a gun everywhere I go.
Right. Like I know he's a gun person. Like he has guns and things.
Okay.
He's good with guns.
Did you know that he had one with him?
No.
When he came over?
No, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because
Okay.
he's very, very professional.
So, Sally, I'm very glad that you made that comment, because that is totally true. One of the things that stands out is Laurie interrupts the woman who's interrogating her, and she actually steers the conversation in a subtle way, the way that she wants it to go. I also think you can see the emotion with, here's another thing. When Charles was killed, you actually saw Laurie smiling. Isn't that a sign of emotion? That she seems happy. And wasn't she happy because didn't she think at that point that she'd made $1 million? When the officers came to do the welfare check, you actually heard Laurie laughing as well. Isn't that also a sign of emotion? It's not having zero emotion, but I do agree that part of psychopathy is being very manipulative, and she is very manipulative. But I also think that she is quite emotionally intelligent. She's able to manipulate, not because she doesn't have any emotional knowledge, but because she does.
Proficient, professional,
So
responsible is usually a good
Right,
but
I'm
right?
responsible with it.
And at this point, we about halfway into the interview, and you actually see how Laurie tries to convince, and she's using that strategy of Darvo, deny. How does it go? Just look at that again. It's deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender, right? And she applies that and basically turns Charles into this typical horrible husband. You know, the stereotypical, if you're a female divorcee, then someone that you probably dealt with when you got divorced, someone who is selfish and antagonistic and whatever, and she's telling that story. But how did Charles experience Laurie? Laurie was cheating on Charles. Laurie wanted more than Charles, I guess, was willing to give. Laurie started wanting to have a better life than she was having. She wanted her cake and eating it, right? Terry, by the way, good to see you here. So in this interview, at about the 20-minute mark, she folds her arms at this point, where the question gets quite sort of pointedly about Alex and the gun and Charles, right? So is she praying now? Is the reason that she's folded her arms because she's praying?
And then, do you remember if at any time, so you were trying to get away from him,
Right.
and you heard the shot. Prior to the shot, do you remember at any point hearing your husband or your brother saying anything to either of them?
No.
Ireland, a land of rolling green pastures.
Anyone been to Ireland? It is quite a cool country. Okay, let's continue. Sorry about that.
So my second very ridiculous question is there anything else that I didn't ask about or anything that we didn't cover that you think is important? I always ask that just because I wasn't there, and so we're going through something that happened a super small amount of time.
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So do you see that sudden change? She goes from being guarded, sitting like that, and then suddenly she's sitting on the chair. She's her legs are sort of open. I don't know if you remember when she was sitting and the police served her. 1 minute she's sort of lying back, and when she had the papers, she sort of sat the way she's sitting now, which is quite a sexually suggestive position. Anyway, so that's one thing. But what comes across so often in this police interview is Laurie smiling. And again, is she smiling because she's being manipulative? Probably. Is she smiling because she's actually enjoying the situation? There's some duping delight going on. In other words, there is some emotion at play. I think so. And so I want to come back to, is it 21 minutes 24? Notice how she smiles right at the beginning when she's told, tell me from the beginning what happened. And look at the way that she can barely contain herself, right? Just go to that point. So yes, she's also folding her arms right in the beginning, almost like she's trying to not fold her arms. You can imagine if she did participate in a murder, then this is a very perilous situation to be in, to be asked questions by the police. She doesn't want to be in this situation. She doesn't want to be asked. She doesn't want to be investigated. But at the same time, she needs to almost act as though it's kind of not a big deal, and there's like nothing to see here. So I want to kind of get to that point where, right at the beginning, she smiles just prior to giving her story.
Like the first time. Well, and now she can do what she wants. So
Exactly.
she's better off that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know Laura's your first name, right? Lauri.
Lori.
Okay. And then what's your last name?
Vallow. Vallow.
And your date of birth? And your phone number?
So when I look at this, I'm looking at someone who I think is trying to decide, how do I reach this person that's sitting next to me? How do I tell them a story that's going to be convincing? In other words, she's trying to determine the psychology of the person that she's with. What story is going to work with her, right? She's thinking on her feet. Remember, she used to be a hairdresser. She's trying to get a sense of, it's woman to woman. Has this woman also had negative experiences with men? How can I key into those, right? And ultimately, she succeeded. In the beginning, the Chandler Police Department accepted Laurie's story, right? In the beginning, even Kay and Larry accepted Laurie's story. And it was because Laurie was seemingly a normal, nice person. It was so hard to believe that she was capable of doing what she's done. But now you can't flip the switch and suddenly say, oh, now that she's been convicted, well, now she was a psychopath all along.
And why does right?
Okay. Why does this cop not notice psychopathy here? Why in the what do you call it? The assessments to deal with Laurie's competency, did that not come up?
Okay, I know this sounds silly, but
now watch carefully.
It's probably the easiest way to start, is just to tell me what happened. And then, so you can start what makes the most sense to you. And we'll just work our way through and I'll just kind of clarify.
Sure.
So I know you talked to the initial patrol officer.
And he just got information.
Okay. So yeah, if you can just kind of tell me kind of what happened. It sounds like some of this may have started last night or something along those lines.
Right.
So start where you think it makes the most sense.
Okay. So,
So what do you think that is? What do you think that is, where just tell me the story of what happened to Charles, and it's now she's on stage, it's now your turn to say something, and she starts with that little, almost like a dance. She's kind of going into, let's tell a fictional story now, which is exactly what she does. And can you see what is on the picture there? She's got a very big smile on her face. She's actually going to now lift her hands to sort of hide that smile. Do you think that she's not showing any emotion here? Watch that again.
Start where you think it makes the most sense.
okay. So,
I told you, it's a crazy question.
Well, so we moved into this house 3 weeks ago because he offered to get me a house here where all my family is. So we were in Houston.
So my sense is that just at the thing of, I'm a police officer, I want you to tell me the story. And it's like she almost is so overcome with emotion, but it's kind of amusement. Like, I'm so glad we are where we are right now. I'm about to get $1 million. My plans worked out perfectly. All I've got to do is just tell you a story, and then can you kind of see that? So anyway, let's jump back to where we were, somewhere around here. And you'll notice when you watch this interview, she is going all the time going from folded arms to open, folded arms open. There's a lot of inappropriate smiling going on. And she isn't actually a very good liar, but she is quite a personable person. She's quite a friendly and engaging person. She can kind of, you know, warm up to you in a way. She's quite a likable person, I would say. Excuse me.
Trying to get away from him,
Right.
and you heard the shot. Prior to the shot, do you remember at any point hearing your husband or your brother saying anything to either of them?
Yeah, that's well said.
No.
So my second very ridiculous question is there anything else that I didn't ask about or anything that we didn't cover that you think is important? I always ask that just because I wasn't there, and so we're going through something that happened a super small amount of time.
Yes. Can I
So,
step?
yeah, go for it.
Just thinking.
So is it being too obvious to say whether you like your husband or not, whether you like your partner or not, if he's just been murdered and you were sort of around when it happened, is it something to smile about in a police station? If you're innocent, and you might say some people maybe are, you know, less grounded and they, you know, but just in a general sense, would a reasonable person in a police setting like this, and maybe they didn't actually like their spouse, would it be normal in a police interview to assess your possible role in their death and to assess possibly what happened to that person, to be smiling about it, to be laughing about it? Because you see a totally different Laurie in court when she's hearing her sentence read out. This is Laurie unfiltered, with no judge telling her, you know, please don't show any emotion. It's just Laurie and this officer. And so she's choosing to behave the way that she wants to behave. And I actually wanted to be in court this week because I anticipated Laurie would testify. I just thought she's the kind of person who, because she's a pageant queen and she's been in pageants, and I thought that she would back herself, that she's confident, and that she would think that she could charm the jury. But maybe the Murdoch case caused her counsel to think twice, because Murdoch made a horrible mess of his testimony. And so here's an example of Laurie. She's not on the stand yet, but she's talking to an officer, and she convinces the officer at the end of the day. One-on-one, she convinces this person that her story is credible. It was only much later that they tried to look at the circumstances. And then remember how long it took for Laurie to be charged with Charles's murder? Let's see if I can just find that date. Unless you guys know what it is. She was indicted in 2021. So it took 2 years for the facts to overcome this moment where she tells her story. It took 2 years. So on June the 30th, she was charged by an Arizona grand jury with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. That's with Charles Vallow, right? June 30th, 2021. And so that's barely 2 years. That's almost 2 years later. Charles was murdered July 11th, 2019, right? 7/11/2019, and some people were saying that just the date was also of significance to Laurie because she thought 7/11 was a lucky number. So that's how long it took to overcome this story. And so the point is that when Laurie first told the story, the officers accepted it. Let's continue.
He was just so angry, like super scary.
Did
You
you
know how
think,
you take your phone away from like a 16-year-old and they freak out?
Uh-huh.
Like their world disintegrates. Like I've taken my phone away from a 16-year-old boy before and he's like wanted to kill himself because like they cannot talk to him. That's how it was. It was like there's something on his phone that he does not want me to see that he was like freaking out. Like to the point where I thought he would hit me in the back of the head to get the phone.
okay. So you thought, and not, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you thought it was possible that he was going to hurt you.
Absolutely, he was gonna hurt me and Tylee.
Okay.
Not JJ, he would never hurt JJ.
Okay.
And he hurt my brother. Like
Yeah.
he was going like ballistic about it was bad.
Okay. I'm gonna go talk to her real quick.
Okay.
And then if obviously, we'll be here for a little bit, hopefully not too much longer. But if you think of anything or there's anything that kind of pops in your head or something else that we didn't cover, obviously. So I'm gonna go.
So there you see her folding her arms again. So you can't quite see that because of the the comment that's put up from Deborah. But can you see how good Laurie is at changing the scales of power? She tells a story and suddenly she's on top. Can you just think about how powerful you must feel if you want someone dead, someone kills that person, you're supposed to get $1 million out of that. You go to the police, tell a story, and the police believe you. Can you imagine how powerful a person feels under that situation? When you can fool people over and over again, yes, you do feel powerful. Yes, she does feel powerful.
I'll talk to her for just a little bit, and then I'll kind of come back and check with you, and then we'll kind of go from
I do think it's interesting when she's asked, can you explain to me how Charles or why Charles was murdered? The first thing she mentions is emotion. The first thing she mentions is his rage, that he goes ballistic, whatever, that he's going to hurt someone, whatever. Meanwhile, isn't it Laurie who was actually a threat to Charles, to Tammy, to her own children, right? And where did that threat come from? Did it come from not being emotional or getting emotional? Did it come from falling in love with someone and then deciding that that wasn't right and I need to do something about it? Is what's going on here due to a lack of emotion or an excess of emotion?
there. So I know my partner's talking to your brother over in one of the other interview rooms. So we're going to just try to get, as much done as we can and go from there. Okay.
Can't go.
Oh no,
Do
what's that?
this to clear out.
What a horrible ad.
And then,
sorry guys. That wasn't supposed
is there
to be on
anybody
there.
that you need to call or anything,
Sorry,
or you want to wait a little bit?
Came out of nowhere.
what I would say.
And wait a little bit, we'll see.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know what I would say.
And if you want to, you can think about it. So we do have victim services that work within the police department. They're right over here. They're not cops, they're civilians. And they do, Jessica, who was out there with the fire department, so they're kind of our crisis response. They come right away.
Mm-hmm.
So our victim services that work in the department are kind of more long-term type support systems. So they're just a really good resource because they do a lot of stuff with our families and things like that and can help with support services and questions you might have.
She's been through so much.
So it might be a
I
good
just
idea.
can't stand for her to have to go through all this.
Yeah, it might be a good idea maybe before I take you guys back today that I get one of them to come in and maybe sit and talk with you guys and see. And it's not something there's a bunch of stuff they can, offer, but it's good to have a contact and like a name and a face and a phone number.
That'd be good.
That way maybe a couple days from now, a week from now, or if there's something going on or you think you need help with something, it may not be something that's necessarily up like me and my partner's alley, but it very much may be up theirs. So I'd like for you to meet one of them before we leave. That way, hopefully if there's something that they can help you and your daughter with, they can, or even JJ or whatever else.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I hadn't even thought about him.
Yeah. So.
I mean, he's used to him not being there, but he wouldn't understand even if you told him.
Right.
Like, that somebody passed away, he doesn't understand
what that means. Well, I mean, it's hard at 7 to understand that
Anyway,
anyways.
that's true, but with him, he just doesn't, which is probably better because he doesn't comprehend things,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know, it's just, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah. So let me go find one of them, and then we'll make sure that you guys get to meet with them before you leave, because that might be something very helpful for you guys. And I'm going to go speak with your daughter for just a little bit, and we'll kind of go from there. Okay? And if you need anything, let me know, okay? Okay.
You think she's praying at this moment? You think she's praying, meditating? What do you think she's doing? As far as I know, the timestamp here is 9 minutes past 10. So this was literally like within an hour, maybe an hour and a half of Charles's murder. It wasn't like later that afternoon. It was literally about an hour and a half later. One thing that struck me in court is that Laurie is very thin. She's a very thin lady. So is Melanie Gibb, and so is also what's her name? That the lady that came in from Hawaii. That friend. Can't remember her name. Was it? All of them were really thin ladies. So Are you saying that it's cold in July in Arizona? Anyway, let's jump ahead. It's quite a lot of not much happening. She stays in that position for quite a long time. And then she's joined. Is she joined again? Basically at this point.
I like your daughter a lot.
She's fun.
Yeah. So one of the victim services, Denise, is here. So I kind of told her just a little bit of what happened.
Okay.
So if you're good with it, I'm going to have her come over and I'm going to introduce her to you guys so you guys can talk for a little bit, which kind of works well too because I need to run over to where my partner's at and just talk to him a little bit. That way you guys will have a little bit, hopefully, extra support if you need it. So I'm going to go grab Denise real fast and then introduce you guys. Okay?
And then so Denise arrives over here.
Stuff. And then you can just, once you guys talk and kind of, you can decide if you're comfortable with Tylee coming in or whatever.
Okay, sure.
And then we'll
I just didn't want her to be left alone in there by herself.
Yeah.
She's freaking out. Okay.
So we keep kind of popping in and checking on her and
I
stuff.
just didn't want her to be alone too long.
Yeah.
We'll be as brief for as long as you want, okay? I'm here to try to, you get lots of choices when you talk, so we'll just get started and then then we'll go from there. That sound okay?
Okay, so that was that. Now I want to just have a look at a couple of comments. This is an article 12news.com, and Laurie says he's plotting something. That is a reference to what she said during this interview about Charles Vallow. He's plotting something. Can you see how cleverly inverted that is? That's exactly what she was doing. She was plotting Charles's death, not only that he's gone to the dark side, but also that Alex knew that Chad knew that. They were casting things onto him. He had various demon names. He was Ned. He was it Ned Schneider? And he was Hippolos and all of that kind of thing. She knew about that. She was plotting something. And it's so easy to then say, how did this happen? Well, because he was plotting something. You just throw the whole thing onto somebody else. So I just found that really quite ironic, is the way she convinced the cops that Charles's death was whatever it was, almost that Charles was responsible for his own death. And you kind of had the same thing with, if you think about it, in her story to the cops, Charles is kind of responsible for his own death. He gets angry. He does something. And that's according to Laurie. Tylee is kind of responsible for her own death according to Laurie, because Tylee behaves in a certain way. JJ is responsible for his own death according to Laurie, because he knocks off a picture of Christ. Tammy is responsible for her own death in the sense that, I guess, a demon occupies her. It's not because actually we want this person dead. No. They are responsible for their own death, right? That's the story. That's the lie. Okay, now I'm going to play you some of the defense case that I thought were some of the best points from the defense case. This is from East Idaho News, just the audio.
Mom died in her sleep. Okay, Dad. So, just just evidence. You're being asked to convict Lori on killing Tammy when Lori's in Hawaii. You're being asked to convict Lori for killing Tammy when do we even know for sure it's a homicide? Have you been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that it's even a homicide? So we hear from the neighbors, good folks, Alice, Gilbert.
So I thought that was quite a good defense argument from Archibald. I think if you start to chip at the prosecution's case and you start to create a crack, and the crack starts where you say, first of all, do we really know that Tammy was murdered? Secondly, even if she was murdered, well, Lori was in Hawaii at the time. How can you possibly accuse her? She was in Hawaii, right? And I thought that was quite a good argument just within that little square. Obviously, if you take everything else away, then that argument kind of stands up. But obviously, if you look at the fact that, well, how come Tammy's husband ends up in Hawaii as well with Lori and they get married, right? That's the circumstantial thing. So can you see one of the things we learn in this case is that you can even have an alibi like that when someone's murdered in Idaho and you are in a Hawaii, you could nevertheless be guilty of murder if the idea was yours. You just had the idea to kill someone and somebody else did that. You can still be guilty of murder, even though you've got an alibi, right? Yeah, that's totally true. So that was one, I thought, strong point in an otherwise pretty weak defense case. And then here's another one.
Mom died in her sleep. Okay, Dad.
Oh no,
So,
is this the same one?
Just evidence. You're being asked to convict Lori on killing Tammy when Lori's in Hawaii.
Not quite sure what happened there. I thought this was supposed to be.
And Todd Gilbert, nice people.
Anyway, so there's somewhere else where, and I've actually not been able to find it, where Archibald, I thought, made quite a good case. And the case was, who is Lori Vallow? What did she actually believe? And I actually thought that was a very strong case from the defense, because that is, I think, the weakest aspect of the prosecution case. And I think what I was expecting and hoping for was that Lori would testify this coming week, like Monday, and they would also bring psychologists, the defense, and that would be part of their case. And then obviously they didn't. They said it would be an 8-week case. It ended up being 7 weeks. And so that's where we are now. Have you guys seen this picture? It's a picture of Tylee and Lori. Do you think Tylee loved her mother because her mother was a psychopathic narcissist? Do you think JJ, before everything went the way it went, there are pictures of the whole family looking very happy together. You see Colby as well. Colby loved his mother. You get that incredible indignation from Colby and also from Summer, Lori's sister, that she can't understand how this warm, wonderful person, even David Warwick said she was a wonderful host, right? And so I just find it very simplistic at the end of this whole story that you can take everything we know about a person and say, oh, she was a narcissistic psychopath. Really? I know that term's reassuring because it feels like now we know exactly who Laurie is, but I think it's the opposite. I think coming to the end of this trial, although she was right to be convicted, although the evidence that the prosecution brought to bear was immense, I still don't think there's a decent sense of, number one, who Laurie is, and number two, how do these beliefs change a person? And I can tell you part of that answer is that the whole doomsday thing is about two things: fear and control. I'm going to make you very afraid of the most catastrophic thing that can happen. Not only the end of your world, but the end of the whole world. But don't worry, I can also provide you the solution. So that is lying, manipulating, on a very high level. But it's also being emotionally intelligent enough to know that that's going to work with somebody, telling them what they want to hear. So, and like I think there's some people who don't want to deal with this area of what was Laurie's actual psychology. No, I don't want to hear about that. All I want to know is that she's guilty. But on this channel, that is the kind of thing that we spend our time with. Like, we ask the question, why? And why is based on who? And who is about someone's identity. And so I've got some notes that I put together here. If you say that these crimes happened in the Laurie Vallow case, these crimes happened because of extreme beliefs, or that extreme beliefs played a role in this extreme case, So let me put it a different way. If you take the extreme beliefs out of the equation, do you think Laurie could still have convinced Alex to commit a murder? Like, Alex, I don't like Charles. I want to marry this other guy and we can get his money. Do you think Alex would have done that? If there was nothing about zombies, nothing about, the whole religious thing, do you think Alex would have said, okay, so you want me to murder that person for insurance? Do you think he would have done it? Thanks a lot, Amber. So my personal opinion is, if you take the extreme beliefs away, I don't think this crime could have happened. And then the question that then comes up is, why did those extreme beliefs come up in the first place? And my answer to that is because Laurie was in a position where she felt powerless, maybe in her marriage. Maybe she felt like, I'm 49 years old, I'm in my late 40s, and I can't believe this is my life. At one point, I was going to be this, so I thought I would be winning this or that pageant. Oh, another very good argument that Archibald made was, he said, this can't be about greed because Charles was earning up to $500,000 a year, and Chad had no money. Chad was basically bankrupt. Chad wasn't making any money from his books. So why on earth did she go from Charles to Chad? And then the answer is, Chad made her feel a lot better about herself than what Charles did. But then she also needed money for that whole fairy tale to take place. And so if you're saying that Chad made Laurie feel good about Laurie, does that mean she's a psychopath, or does that mean she's actually very susceptible to flattery and to emotion? She's actually more emotional than most people. Yeah, she wanted the 1 million immediately. Anyway, let's get back to this thing about extreme beliefs. So just in a very basic way, let's take that question. if you take away, let me put up this other image. If you take away the extreme beliefs in the Laurie Vallow case, do you think Charles would still have died? I don't think so. Do you think Tylee would still have died? I don't think so. And would she have died in the way that she did? You know, I don't think so. In a kind of a symbolic way. Do you think JJ would have died and also buried in the way that he was? I don't think so. What about Tammy? And then you say, so if extreme beliefs are part of the fabric of this case, aren't they to some extent also the fabric of other cases? You might say, I can't think of other cases where people have got extreme beliefs, but they don't have to be extreme religious beliefs. They can simply be extreme beliefs, right? And I'm in Moab right now, and I've been shopping at the co-op where Gabby and Brian went, and I've been going to the Arches National Park every day for the past couple of days, and I have kind of been walking in their footsteps to some extent, and I couldn't help thinking that Brian Laundrie had some pretty extreme beliefs that he felt when he walked somewhere that he didn't want to wear shoes. And when, he didn't want to buy bottled water, if he had water, it couldn't be in a bottle, a plastic bottle. He also wanted, a certain kind of experience when he was buying food, right? And you might say that's not an extreme belief. And I would be the first person to say, I'm also quite an earthy person. I don't like the idea of always buying plastic bottles and blah, 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 blah. But if you insist on never, ever buying a plastic bottle and you're driving through the desert and you insist on walking everywhere barefoot and they're long, and I mean, I've experienced this in the Arches National Park, they're long trails and the ground is hot, but you're insisting on walking around barefoot. Then that person is going to be difficult either to spend time with, or they're going to be imposing all of that on you. It's going to be, their beliefs are going to be imposing all sorts of limits on your behavior. We can't do this, we can't do that, whatever. And that then raises this question, the same question you have with Laurie Vallow, you have with Brian Laundrie. Where did these extreme beliefs come from in the first place? And I think that some of these beliefs mean well. So like this idea, don't buy plastic bottles because you want to protect the environment. Don't wear shoes because you want your feet on the earth. Do this, don't do this, whatever. They mean well. The idea is to protect the earth. The extreme beliefs that the world is ending and only certain people, it's kind of this idea that sinful people are going to get the punishment they deserve, and some people can be saved. And so maybe we need to act in a certain way. I think there's something reasonable and rational in that. I mean, you could argue that the world is literally in a perilous place right now, on many fronts. And so if we stop misbehaving, if we stop being unrealistic, if we stop being greedy, or whatever it is, then we can save ourselves and we can save our world. We can prevent the world ending, right? So although it's an extreme belief, like if every day you wake up and you think, is the world going to end today? That's quite extreme. But the idea of the belief is actually, it kind of it comes from a good place. Let's not have the world end. Let's not damage the planet by buying another plastic bottle, whatever. Right? So it's a good belief, but that the way it's applied, the way that this good thing is treated is ultimately very bad. So, for example, I don't want the world to end, but these people are in the way of whatever our divine thing is. They're zombies. They're preventing God's divine holy fire. Well, let's kill those people. You could only have those extreme actions taking place if you totally bought into the extreme beliefs. And I think the same with Brian Laundrie. I think one of the big things Brian and Gabby argued about were all those little things. No, I can't believe you bought that bottled water. I can't believe we are eating at that expensive restaurant when we could have gotten food from the co-op. I can't believe you haven't bathed in so long. Your feet stink. Well, I'm not going to wash myself with bottled water, whatever. Right? And so out of a place of something that's quite good, something bad and extreme happens as well. And I think what ultimately happens with extreme beliefs is anxiety and control. So whatever, and look at this picture of Laurie on your screen. Whatever your background is, or someone else's background, or Laurie's background, or Brian Laundrie's background, or Shanann Watts' background, whatever that background, it keys into some element where there's anxiety in their lives. It might be anxiety about money. It might be anxiety about love. It might be anxiety about where you fit into the world. It might be anxiety about that the world's an intimidating place. It might be anxiety about making it in the real world, having a proper job, right? Right. So that extreme belief is actually tied somewhere else to your personal anxiety in where you fit in with the world, how the world sees you, right? You see that? And so at the same time that there's that anxiety, there's also an attempt to control. And so the anxiety leads to control. The anxiety leads to an extreme belief. And what does that extreme belief ask you to do? Exert excessive control either over yourself or over somebody else, or both. And the illusion is that by exerting excessive control over your own life or over somebody else's life, you're somehow satiating, or that's not the right word, you somehow assuaging, you somehow pushing away this terrible tension, and you're getting some kind of sense of control over your own world. It's a little bit like Rafael Nadal playing tennis, and he's got all of these little rituals. He puts his hair behind his ear, he adjusts his shirt, he doesn't step over the line, and that gives him a sense that he's in control of the tennis match. Actually, none of that is true, but the idea, those rituals give him a sense that he does have some control, because that's almost where his focus goes. Instead of worrying about his opponent, he kind of goes into this automatic thing where he puts his anxiety into these, and those are also kind of extreme beliefs. In terms of the tennis court, having all of these little superstitions is weird. It's extreme, but it actually works for Rafael Nadal. That's fine on a tennis court. But what about in real life beyond the tennis court? And so you can even take Shanann Watts, and you could say the whole Thrive thing that she was into, where if I buy a patch, my whole life changes. I'm suddenly going to have money. I'm suddenly going to have success. I'm suddenly going to have a happy family. I'm suddenly going to thrive in every possible way because I bought a little patch. And then you ask the question, but isn't that belief addressing actually existential anxiety in some other area? Maybe it's the lupus thing, or maybe whatever it is. And so is the role then of that extreme belief some kind of
We need to talk.
a symbolic
Being with
effort
you
at
has been
control?
such a headache. Ugh, the pressure. You're done causing me pain. Break up with sinus symptoms with just one dose or your money back. Mucinex Sinus Max.
Oh, that just came out of nowhere. Sorry about that. Okay, so that's Darbo. So that's kind of my spiel, guys. So that is the sort of thing I wanted to say regarding this case. And at the end of the day, are extreme beliefs founded on reality, or aren't they? Are they extreme beliefs by virtue of the fact that they realistic or not realistic? And so what I want to say to you guys, the 330 people in chat, thank you for being here. And I must say, thank you to my community. I'm in America right now because of you. So I really do mean that. I'm very grateful to you guys for your support. Just watching my videos has, made me a lot more interested in you and your country, and that's why I'm here. And the fact that you've watched them as much as you have is why I've been able to afford to come here. So thank you very much for that. And I want to share, and I am sharing a lot of my journey on Instagram. So head to Instagram, check out. I'm still going to be in America for another 2 to 3 weeks. So if you haven't followed me on Instagram, you can and you should. I'll put a link to that up in a second. But the other thing that I kind of want to give back, like, I don't like the idea that you watch a trial and then you just at the end of it say guilty in a sort of almost a sadistic way. I'm so glad Laurie Vallow's guilty. Yeah, obviously we want justice to take place, but do we want to take pleasure in it? We want justice, but I don't know if we should be entertained or take pleasure in it. That's totally different. Right? But the thing that I want to give back to you guys, besides sharing my journey through America with you, by the way, every day I record about 10, 20, 30-minute podcast, which I put on Patreon, just thoughts on the day and where I am and what I'm thinking about, just some personal stuff. That's on Patreon. But what I want to share now in terms of the Laurie Vallow case is basically, I don't like the idea that you simply follow a case and you sort of voyeuristically get the result that you want, and then you go on to the next case. I like to look at the case and say, what do we learn about us? What do I learn about me through this particular case? What do I learn about society through this particular case? What do I learn about some specific kinds of people in this specific case, right? And, in the Chris Watts case, it was, what do you call it? It was multi-level marketing. You got a very fascinating insight into that dimension in some Americans' lives. In the Kylie Rodney case, you got a fascinating look into a kid who was homeschooled and, how she grew up. Gabby Petito, you got to look at how someone tried to cope with the pandemic, how they try to live their best life despite the limits of the pandemic. And in a big way, Gabby Petito's story is why I'm in America and also why I'm in America's national parks. I thought, what a lovely way to explore any country. You just go from national park to national park, and I haven't been able to stay away from the arches, right? And everyone has a different idea of what's meaningful and what is an adventure to them. And when your adventure doesn't go the way you want it, what do you do? Do you do something extreme? Do you lower your standards? Do you adapt? What do you do? And so I want to challenge you to think about your most extreme beliefs and simply, without judging yourself or without trying to decide where it comes from, what are your most extreme beliefs and where do you think they come from? and how long have they been with you? So it's just something you can privately do. You don't have to answer that on here. You can open your notebook and think about your most extreme beliefs, or even someone that you know. And then ask, where do you think that comes from? What is that actually doing? What is the purpose of that belief? And if there's someone that you love, that you're struggling to have a relationship with them, or you're struggling to connect with them, instead of arguing about their beliefs, try and understand where it's coming from, understand the emotion, understand that they are struggling with anxiety, that they're struggling with insecurity, and try and be a reassuring presence for them, not through their belief system, but as a person. And who knows, maybe you can reach them in that way. But instead of battling with a person through some kind of symbolic framework that you're not going to agree on, one way to reach a person is the source of that belief system. And usually it is some other kind of anxiety. Does that make sense? It's also another way to understand yourself. Yeah, so I could be quite self-indulgent and talk about some of the ways that I'm anxious, and the sort of lesson of all of this is you become less anxious by moving out more often into the world, not withdrawing from it. You become less anxious by engaging with others and going out, not creating systems that pretend to be systems of control, but they're really not. So you might be OCD and you might believe in this, you might believe in that. That all of that is a fake thing that makes you feel safe. And the only way to really feel safe is to go out into the world and achieve agency and become responsible for your own life and learn how the world works and learn where you fit in it, in my opinion. Thanks a lot, Paik. Thank you. And so in this exercise where we're thinking about extreme beliefs, ask yourself, is it really founded on reality? Is it founded, are these extreme beliefs, or were Laurie's extreme beliefs founded on reality? Were Brian Laundrie's extreme beliefs founded? And the answer is actually some of it is. Like the world is in a way ending, right? It might take 1 million years, or it might whatever, but there is an argument that there's a threat to the world. There's a war going on right now in Ukraine. But to wake up every day that any second now the world's going to end, that's a bit extreme, right? So you've kind of got to ask, are these beliefs founded on reality? If not, you're probably struggling with some kind of anxiety, and you're transferring your anxiety instead of in its existential place to this other extreme belief. And so your extreme belief is a proxy for some other existential anxiety. So don't live out your anxiety through an extreme belief, rather deal with the original anxiety, and you'll be a lot happier. What did... Yeah, I'm not saying all extreme beliefs are religious. You can have an attitude to, like, I have a little bit of an irrational, what do they call it? When you, yeah, I've kind of got an irrational fear around the number 111. I was given that number, and then in that year I broke 2 ribs, and a friend of mine died, and all sorts of things around about that time. And now when I see that number, I'm definitely, and is that really rational, that a number, and so that's where you've got to sort of realize, I think you need to just calm down, So a lot of that is just self-observation, where you realize, wow, this anxiety that I'm experiencing isn't normal. And instead of feeding whatever this extreme thing is, deal with anxiety. And how can you deal with anxiety? You can exercise. You can talk to someone about the anxiety, not defend a particular belief that also deals with that anxiety. You can spend time in nature. One thing, when you go out into these immense landscapes, you realize even if I've got huge problems, I'm this tiny little person moving through the landscape. How big can my problem really be, right? And the same with somebody else's problem. Someone else, when you're on a mountain, is a dot somewhere else, or so the problems are some little speck on that dot. Well, the same applies to you. Anxiety, in a way, is normal. Extreme debilitating anxiety isn't normal, and that's where you've got to recognize it. But I mean, some anxiety is normal. We are all going to die one day. That is something worth being a little bit anxious about. The fact that we are all going to die means that we need to make the most of our lives. We need to realize, well, I don't have unlimited time. I've got to make choices, and what if I make some mistakes? Yeah, that's the issue. Try not to make mistakes. So Elizabeth says, good night, thank you. Okay, thanks a lot for that. Yeah, so anxiety is not abnormal, but when your anxiety starts to control you, and as a result of that, you start to control others, that's when it becomes a problem. And you could even make the argument that is when it could become criminal. So as soon as someone, now think about it just in a very basic sense, like in a relationship sense. I love you. I'm not sure if you love me. I'm anxious about that. So because I'm anxious about that, maybe it's not justified anxiety because you do actually love me. But I love you. I don't know if you love me. Because I don't know that you love me, I want to control you. And that's the beginning of kind of the end. If you just dealt with that anxiety, you wouldn't need to have control as well. So anxiety and control go together. Deal with the anxiety and the control isn't necessary anymore, right? And the same applies to somebody else. Someone who's controlling you probably is struggling with feelings of some kind of anxiety, and how you can deal with that is maybe by reassuring them, also by acknowledging that even though the anxiety may not be, I talk about emotional reality. Your emotional reality may be totally bogus to me, it may be fictional, irrational, illogical, but it's nevertheless your reality. And your reality is something that affects me. And if I can acknowledge it, I can maybe address your anxiety, and the same vice versa. Cheated no more. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, I've been talking a little bit about Brian Laundrie. Yeah. So I hope you found this analysis worthwhile. And bear in mind, we've gone into this by avoiding that whole conversation of Lori Vallow doesn't show any emotion. She's a narcissistic psychopath, right? And you can respond to that and say, yes, that feels right. It's so simple. It's so true. It's so right. It feels good. Laurie's bad. I'm good. And the world is very simple. It's very black and white. And so you kind of get a sense of Laurie's bad. I'm good. This whole complicated saga's over and we can all live happily ever after. Well, actually, you simply put a label on something, because to not do that means you don't actually understand what's going on. And the harder job is to look at that thing that's quite hard to understand and try and figure it out, because when you start doing that, you start going into some scary places. and we don't want to be afraid. We don't want our anxiety triggered or awakened. But actually, when we face that, we can actually deal with it. One thing that makes fear and anxiety worse is running away from it. It's counterintuitive. It feels like if you face your fear is really going to scare the shit out of you. But actually, it's the opposite. When you face your fear, you realize, wow, this is actually not such a big deal. And I can tell you, I had an irrational fear of driving in America. I've driven in foreign countries before, right? And I kind of had to say to myself, just calm the F down. People drive all over the world, and this is not such a big deal. And I was like, I get it, but I'm really a little bit worried about this. And then I was like, and I think the important step to take was, okay, you are anxious. Well, that might help you be a better driver. So don't just not be anxious. Let's take that anxiety and maybe that can just help you be more alert than whatever. And I've driven through California, I've driven through Oregon, I've driven through Idaho, Arizona, whatever. And there's still a little bit of anxiety there, but I'm a lot more comfortable now. But I also think it's important to be still a little, what's the word? A little anxious so that you don't drive like in a daydream. Does that make sense? So I'm just saying that was a fear I had that was irrational, but it was coming from the right place. It is different. It is scary, but maybe you can use that in a way that's functional. I mean, what's the alternative? That someone else must drive you around, or that you fly everywhere, or that you Uber everywhere. And so part of the process was acknowledging that. And the other thing was try and find a place to drive around that's less scary. And the answer was national parks. Idaho was really like, it felt like a safe place to drive around. And by the time I got to California, I was driving into San Francisco and I've already driven through I've driven through Los Angeles. Not a problem. I mean, it was not, I wouldn't say it wasn't a piece of cake. It wasn't such a big deal, but the belief that driving was such a struggle was a bit extreme, and so it was important to face that. And that's just a silly example. Okay, so let's deal with some of your comments for the last 5 minutes. Monica says psychopaths, no empathy, grandiose sense of self. That's true. Exploitative, love bombing, devaluing and discarding others, magical thinking, zero regard for human life. So what about emotions? Do psychopaths have emotions? So Monica, you must also, so what you're saying is very true, but you must also look at this as obviously within the confines of justice crime. Any crime is psychopathic. Every crime, like a murder, is psychopathic, right? It's your life at the expense of mine. You know, any crime, the Chris Watts case, the Letitia Storr case, there's psychopathy in murder. But I don't think you can then say, because of that moment of psychopathy, your entire life you were always a psychopath. That's true with some people, especially serial killers, not true of, you don't just automatically become a psychopath because you committed murder. It's a psychopathic moment. I did go rafting. You can check my Instagram. You can check that out. Thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Deborah says the driving accomplished is amazing. Yeah, thanks. It is very weird. And when you've been driving all day and it's late at night and you're starting to just, you're worn down, that is when you're actually quite susceptible to a car's coming around the corner and suddenly you're like, I'm on the wrong side of the road, or that car's on the wrong, or whatever, and then you want to do something, and you've got to realize I can't default to my programming. Yeah, so anxiety can be a wonderful, I always say, bad dreams are trying to tell you something, especially if you're having bad dreams constantly. Your subconscious is trying to tell you, please don't continue down this path. Anxiety is a very important thing to be aware of. Don't ignore it, listen to it. Don't ignore it, respond to it. But try not to respond out of just beliefs. Do something. Thanks a lot, Chelsea. I think you need to drive with me in order to say that. There you go. That's it. Some anxiety is genetically based. And I mean, there are certain areas where anxiety is good. I think it's good to be quite sensitive about certain things, but I think they did a study on Alex, what's his name? Alex Honnold, the free climber, and they said that he simply has a very low level of anxiety. And so when he rock climbs, it's a way for him to feel that anxiety. But you could imagine anyone else in that situation, that anxiety on a rock face isn't good for them, right? So there's also a healthy level of anxiety which helps to protect you and keep you alive and keep you grounded. And then there's an unhealthy level that paralyzes you and causes you to take some kind of extreme step, or you put your faith or trust in an extreme figure, right? I actually had a very weird dream because I'm in Moab right now, and I had a dream recently that I met John Ramsey's wife, because there's a Pastor Jay's here in Moab, and John Benet Ramsey's father actually lives somewhere in Moab. And I actually had a dream that I think I met his wife. She looked nothing like his wife that I've seen on television. And I kind of had this weird sense of, I don't know, it's just a weird reality shift. Anyway. Brandon says Laurie was around 49 years of age. Okay, and yeah, well, I do think that I'm 51 and turning 50, you do sort of feel like I want to enjoy my life. I want to make something of my life. And I wouldn't be surprised if Laurie felt that as well. Like, my life she may have felt, my life hasn't really amounted to much. I wanted more out of my life. And then Chad was giving her permission, a license, a off-ramp in order to deal with that aspect. And so she may have legitimately had an existential anxiety of, I'm getting old. I'm this beautiful woman. I'm getting old, but I don't want to get old. I don't want to lose my life. And Chad was a way of saying, you can be reborn. You can, you're actually a goddess. And it was something that deep within her, she wanted to hear and wanted to experience. But obviously it's extreme, and it was a con. It's not true. It's not Patsy. It's someone else. I didn't eat at the Merry Piglets. It's just not my kind of place. It was also quite full. I also didn't eat at the Mad Greek restaurant. The only place I have eaten at that is associated with true crime is the Co-op here in Moab. I've actually eaten there quite a few times. It was just in a dream. How did I know? Because in the dream I did know. So that's it. What did she look like? She just looked older than I expected. That's all. Okay, guys, we've just gone over 2 hours. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Laurie Vallow case. As I say, I was supposed to be flying there tomorrow, midday. Tomorrow's Mother's Day. I want to wish you all a happy Mother's Day. And again, I want to really thank you for supporting this channel, because I've had a really great trip to America, and it wouldn't have been possible without you. In fact, I've been telling people during my trip, that basically you guys, YouTube, has basically paid for my holiday. It hasn't just been holiday fun and games. I've also done some work, but it's also been kind of an adventure, and I sort of really want to sort of shake each one of your hands and give you a little hug and say high five. Thanks very much for supporting me. It's not only you guys, also many others who aren't watching right now, but thanks especially to you guys, and I really mean that. It's been a pretty amazing trip so far, and I'm sort of going into the end game now. I'm going to Denver in about 10 days or so. I'm going to Denver, and then I'm going to Delphi in Indiana, and I'll tell you guys where I'm going after that. And then there's a couple of days in New York, and then I'm heading back to the middle of winter. It's starting to get warmer here, pleasantly warm, and each day that goes by, it's getting colder. In my in my country, so that's what's waiting for me. Winter. What's that saying? Winter is here. Winter is coming. Zoe says, I've enjoyed your awesome photography. Thanks a lot. So yeah, again, if you want to follow my journey, it doesn't cost you anything. If you're just curious, you can go on to my Instagram, and I'll put a link to it now. And you can follow up. I put up pictures sort of at the end of the day, every day, so you can check that out. Kat says, it's an honor to meet you. It was also great meeting you, and quite a nice surprise. And I wonder whether I'm going to be meeting any more TCRS folk between now and the end of the month, hopefully. Some people are really narrowly missed. I know there are a couple of people in Oregon that are almost that we almost saw. I just missed Nisi in Prescott. But when I return to America, and I will be returning to America, I'll be a little bit more open about where I'm going, and we can arrange a couple of TCRS get-togethers. Yeah, that's true. Ison says, I don't want your trip to end. Cheated No More says, you visited so many special places in America. Yeah, the Grand Tetons are definitely quite special. Well, that means a lot. Kathy, I think you're going to have to open an Instagram account. It's just pictures. So, maybe it's worth it. Oh, Cake, is Denver your stomping grounds? Sounds good. I'll be in Denver from about the 21st. So there's a bit of a heads up. Deborah says, can you get Timmy and come back? to be honest, I don't really want to be thinking about that right now. I just want to enjoy where I am, and I'll think about that when I'm back, I guess. Yeah, I wasn't. I actually thought of going back to Portland to visit the largest fungal colony in the world. I was actually going to, when it looked like the Caitlin Armstrong case was still going to take place, and when it looked like the Idaho 4 case was going to be heard in like late June, early July, my plan was to spend a couple of weeks in Seattle and in the sort of Oregon area. But then when that changed, I kind of changed my plans. JDT says you have a unique perspective. When I'm taking photos, I'm always looking for a perspective that seems to speak to you, and so I have that same approach to true crime. I don't want to, although I want to analyze and I want to figure out the evidence and do all the other things that all the other true crime channels do. I also want to know, who is this person? You know, there's that line Tom Cruise says in Oblivion. I actually watched that movie with Webb in Thousand Oaks a couple of days ago, where he says, "Who are you?" That's the question we've got to ask of every person in true crime, perpetrator, because that's going to tell us everything else. Who are you is going to tell us what the motive is, why it happened, how it happened, and everything else. It's going to connect everything together. And what is so crazy is we seem to ask that question constantly. Who is this person? And we never actually seem to answer it. Even in court, sitting in court, you never really got a sense that anyone really understands who Laurie Vallow is. And I feel that's what we need to be trying to do. And even the prosecutor probably doesn't want to go into that area because you might actually feel sympathetic towards her. I understand that from a legal perspective, but from an authentic true crime perspective, I don't agree with that. I think you've got to know who you're dealing with. And when you go into that area, you start to learn about yourself, and you realize, oh, I'm actually making some similar mistakes. Oh, what about my beliefs? And in a way, the Laurie Vallow case has definitely made me think of a era in my life that I don't really like to think about. And I think it's important to think about it and think, well, you've come a long way, or your thinking is at least a bit more sophisticated, or at least you're not that person anymore, whatever it is, right? And so I also want to do the same with you guys, is say, do you have any extreme beliefs? Do you have any irrational beliefs? Are you struggling with irrational anxiety? Are you being overwhelmed by anxiety? Are you addressing anxiety? Do you know how to address it? Are you overly controlling, either of yourself or somebody else? Isn't the root of that anxiety? How can you deal with that? How should you deal with that? And I can tell you, one simple way just to become anxious is to just never engage with the outside world. Don't engage with other people. Don't go out, don't travel. In other words, don't test yourself in the real world and live in a sort of a fictional place. Well, the moment you step out of that fiction, reality is going to hit you full on. And how well are you going to cope when you're not used to coping with the real world? So, it's one of the things you're supposed to learn as a teenager and as a young adult, is to find your place in the world, and also for the world to see, okay, this is who you are and this is where you belong. And for there to be kind of an agreement between those two. You decide, this is who I am and this is where I belong. And the world kind of says, no. We'll put you over there. And then you either accept that or you don't. And it's sort of, you know. Kathy says, I'm a bit OCD about my house and cleanliness. Well, that's a good thing, but as long as you're not like, the movie What About Bob, where you can't go to a bathroom without using a handkerchief or something. So travel is a really good teacher. Thanks a lot, Letty. Letty says, thanks for sharing your fantastic photos. Thank you. Yeah, so me opening your mind is part of the process, was opening my mind. So, I've had a lot of thoughts that I haven't been able to share yet because I just haven't, I'm not YouTubing every day, but I will be sharing them when I'm in one place for kind of a length of time, certainly on the Team Peachtree channel. Oh, you like the pure leaf tea? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not straightforward. It's not straightforward. Mel, Chelsea says, I'd love to read your poetry. By the way, Chelsea, I saw your hoodie, your TCRS merch hoodie. It looked pretty cool. Thanks a lot. I hope you do paint the Grand Canyon again. Cool. Okay, so that is it from me. Again, happy Mother's Day. Also, just thank you for your wonderful support. Thanks to your support, I'm, it's really on the wave of your support that I'm sort of traveling to America, and I'm just very happy to sort of give back a little, just sharing some of the photos and inspiring you guys, and just I really just, and I want to do this on the Team Peachtree channel, remind you guys how lucky you are to live in such a wonderful place. I'm really enjoying it, and yeah, I'm going to be sad to leave, that's for sure. But I've really enjoyed. It's a first world country, and it feels that way. So many little things, like you're driving and there's a thing on the side of the road that shows you your speed, and if you stay at that speed, it starts flashing lights at you, and then when you do slow down, the lights sort of stabilize. I don't know if that would work in my country. Maybe they should try it, but that's certainly something that stands out to me here. It's like, well, that's showing you your speed. Okay, I'll slow down, kind of thing. Anyway, I've learned a lot and enjoyed a lot as well. Yeah, what about Bob? Definitely a stress buster. Okay, Terry, thanks a lot for being here. Iceland as well. Mothers, have a wonderful day tomorrow. If someone doesn't show their appreciation for you, I am, but I'm sure you are going to have a special day. I don't have a mother anymore, so in a way, all of you collectively are sort of like family in a way, and so I'm really glad that I've created this wonderful community on this channel, and I hope that it's a place where you guys feel comfortable, and there's something positive that comes out of some of these dark tales. So hopefully we're doing some good at the same time. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to probably go and do a hike tomorrow in, I think it's called the Devil's Garden. There's a very long arch there, and I'm going to probably do that as my last day in Moab. So it's hopefully I'll have good weather. Hedy B, it's a pleasure. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Okay, guys, I'll be doing another Van Gogh letters probably on Monday. So those of you interested in that, check out Team Peachtree. For the rest, you can go to Instagram or whatever, but otherwise I'll see you guys, not sure when. There is another case that I've been wanting to talk about in Idaho, a mother who, a wife who poisoned her husband and then wrote a book about it. I might be talking to you guys a little bit about that. But thanks a lot for being here. Take care. Enjoy tomorrow. you are special. You've done something really good for me, and I've had this wonderful experience. So, big high five to you guys. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you guys are going to be pampered, and I'll see you guys sometime next week. So take care, sleep well, and don't be so anxious. And I think we can feel good about the verdict in this case. Justice isn't guaranteed, and it was good to see. I mean, I saw the jurors when I was in court, and they were, I thought, a solid group. They seemed sensible, and this ended up being a sensible decision in a case where you could have had, who knows, something strange going on. Okay, take care, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.